Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Natalie. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, Natalie, thank you so much for the time today. I'm excited for the conversation. And one of the most intriguing things about this conversation is your background. So, do you mind sharing a little bit about your career, work history, and kind of how it's brought you to today?
Sure. So interestingly, I did not start off as being a marketer. I started off as a naval officer, actually. I was an environmental health officer in the Medical Service Corps and focused on infectious disease, preventive medicine, toxicology. I did a lot of really neat stuff and dealt with a lot of germs, as people say. Was in the Navy a total of 12 years. And when it came time to transition out, I had several jobs prior to that were unrelated to public health in recruiting operations, for example. And when I finally opened up the door to the corporate world, I ended up shifting from the Centers for Disease Control and heading into my first corporate role, which was at Forrester Research, which I was started off as a senior analyst and ultimately left as a VP research director of the healthcare vertical. Bringing all those experiences together, back in the Navy, dealing with infectious disease, writing for base papers, then segue into recruiting and learning how to market yourself, use social media and branding, leads generation. Interestingly, all those things came together to sell a product, which was the Navy, and essentially really branding yourself and selling you so that people would be, intrigued by the prospect of doing what you do and, wanting to do that for themselves in their careers. That shifted also into Centers for Disease Control when I worked on the National Wastewater Surveillance System. And we had this really neat project where it was a new organization. We had to brand the team. So I got involved in helping trademark the logo and going through all of that and working with the communications team at the CDC. So all of this was building a foundation that I didn't even know that was happening for marketing. Then ended up going from Forrester Research in market research into a product marketing role in a care management platform. So there, of course, really planted an even more solid foundation of what it is to be a product marketer, which led to where I am today as a market strategist, leading all the content strategy, go to market positioning, analyst relations, and PR at Ateon. That was a long journey.
Yeah, I love it. It's such a cool story. Like, I love the pathway and everything you've done. Also, thank you for your service. That's so amazing. So excited to have you on today. Natalie, what we're going to talk about is your three pillars of product marketing, which are strategy, empathy, and execution. How did you kind of come up with these three pillars and all of that fun stuff?
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe I'll credit my past military background. I love strategy. You can have goals and aspirations, but if you don't have all the steps and the ways that you're going to achieve it, you're going to fail. So that's the first pillar. Empathy is extremely important as well. To do a job well, you have to understand all the jobs of those who are working around you. And when you're writing content, you have to be very mindful of that, especially in marketing when you're looking at selling products. You have to understand the jobs to be done, the workflows, the different decisions that they make when they go and buy a product. All of that comes in under empathy. And of course, execution, right? We can talk all we want, but we have to have all the steps into place to really make our strategy effective. And that's a whole nother huge pillar in itself that starts from the baseline of product research, sitting with all the experts, doing your competitive intelligence and persona analyses, and then actually putting it into effect where you're now putting pen to paper and serving as the voice of the customer. So that's of course an important pillar as well.
I love that. And a lot of what you just talked about rolls up into your definition of what a product marketer does. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because I'll be honest, I've been in previous roles where I've thrown out the question, okay, like who does what? Where does this lie? What does a product marketer do versus someone else? How do you look at that space?
Sure. I think I'm a little biased, but I think they are one of the most important people in a company because they are the eyes and ears and voice of everything. So they're sitting like a sponge or should be on pipeline calls, customer delivery calls. They understand some of the pain points of the customers. They understand what the industry is, your key competitors. They're talking with analysts and understanding what the analysts look for when it comes to building superior platforms. And they're doing all the product research. That's at the heart of what they do. You can think you have the best product, but only because you haven't looked into your competitors. And so you have to not only be able to make an assessment of your current product and the features and what value propositions that they're capable of. You have to understand what your competitors are doing and identify those gaps. And that's a job in of itself. But I wish that was, the only thing that product marketers did. They're also writing content. They're doing one sheets. They're writing white papers and ebooks. They're talking to journalists. They're writing content that's pitchable content. They're ghost writing. They're writing corporate strategy, messaging and positioning, and go to market strategies, segmenting the market. I mean, the list goes on. When you look at the kingdom that is marketing, they essentially touch everything, every aspect. If you do not have a solid product marketer, you're going to be in the dark and you're going to fall behind your competitors in a nutshell.
I love that. So you talked about all of this content and all of these responsibilities. I mean, there's a ton of hats. A lot of it revolves around research, and you have an amazing background in research. You talked about competitive research. I'm sure there's talking to your customers and all sorts of things. How are you, first of all, running that research? And second of all, how do you take the research and turn it into action? Like you say here, the strategy, the empathy, and the execution.
Sure. And this could be a whole nother episode in of itself. I come in with an advantage because I live that life as an analyst. So I would, in any given day, listen to 3 or 4 briefings at a half an hour apiece, and I would drill down into their product, what made them special. And I had the privilege and the honor of being able to ask for any subject matter expert that I wanted. Forrester's a wonderful company. Our analysts, we're very well respected. And if I asked for a SME, 10 times out of 10, they would get me one, and I would have a follow up briefing, and I would get to over time, when you see thousands of these briefings, you understand what it is that defines a market segment and all those different features that you have to be best in class. To borrow from my friends at class who are analysts, that's the name of their company. But to be considered top tier in your field, to be truly a leading platform. And you have that information in market research if you're lucky enough to be an analyst. But if you're no longer an analyst and you're on the vendor side of the house as a product marketer, you either have access to this market research or at least some of it. You have a budget and you're able to read it. If not, and a lot of startups don't have that budget, as we know, analyst firms can be extremely expensive. You have to be very savvy. And that's where the fun stuff comes in. And now, in days when we have generative AI, what you can do is you can scrub web pages and things. I don't want to reveal all my secrets here, but there's certain ways that you can get around not having a subscription and finding out, just enough information from your competitors and what's available on the internet in their customer stories, in their testimonials, and you can basically scrape together what features that they're known for and differentiated. If you're lucky enough to have access to market research, you can go ahead and look at a wave report by Forrester. You can look at a best in class report in a particular market. But, a lot of your research comes from internally and interviewing with your product managers and collaborating with them as you write content. It's also a very collaborative experience because, you only know what you know. You don't work hand in hand with the engineers. So you're basically doing 2 things at once. You're learning about the feature, and then you're then going ahead and researching the value proposition. What really makes that special is that a top line feature that individuals or end users are really needing to do their job. Is it an enhancement? And then you're just learning the workflows of the people who are using the product. That's a little bit about some of the research in addition to the market research. So there's the external research and then the internal on your own teams.
Okay, so that could be a full episode. I mean,
It
that
is.
could
I
be a
kind
lot of
of,
episodes.
rattled on there because you essentially go down rabbit holes because there's so many parts to it. Things that you can find externally, different publications that come out, a period, in your press and your trade media publications as well. That goes into it. You're constantly looking at the trends and predictions. You're also reading, especially in the company they work for now, constantly reading publications. We have many brilliant minds and scientists, and I have the luxury of having their research at my fingertips. Individuals who literally wrote the book in synthetic data, who wrote methods like SPACE and SPIFT. We have all those individuals in our company. So that's been extremely resourceful, and information that's also free on the internet when it comes to Google Scholar. That's been very helpful as well.
Okay, I love that. So I've taken this time and energy and I've done the research. I've got the insights both internally, externally, doing all this crazy cool stuff that you figured out how to do with or without a budget. You can get as creative as you want, collect it from all sorts of different sources. How do you turn that into a storyline? Because obviously, as a product marketer, I am not going to just go and say, here's all the data. Good luck interpreting the story. How do you turn that into a narrative effectively?
Yeah, so that's a whole nother podcast. But you have to understand your personas. And there's all different personas. There's the buyer persona, those making the decisions on whether or not to actually, pull on the purse strings and cough up the money. And then there's the influencers, those individuals that they're not using the platform on a day-to-day basis. However, they're running the departments, and they have a bug in the ear of the key decision maker to get that particular platform. And then of course there's the user, those individuals who are in that platform every day. And they all have different goals. Ultimately, they have the same mission, but they all have different KPIs and they all have different pain points and challenges. So part of your research is knowing what those are and being able to establish that main pain point when you're writing that piece of content. Sometimes content, it might speak to everyone. But for the most part, when you're writing 500, 800, 1600 word blogs or white paper pieces, depending on length, you've got to pick an audience and you have to speak to that one pain point that reels them in. And now that you've grabbed their attention, and then develop the solution around it, which is your product, describe the transformation that product's going to result in, and then the end result of what happens now that you've implemented this product, and what are the big wins that they translate into at your organization. And that's how you tell the story. You reel them in. Now that you've got them, their attention, you wow them with the features, and then you follow it up with some impact and some metrics, and then you close the deal, hopefully.
I love that. That's amazing. All right, Natalie, I have like a billion different questions where I could take this final question. We're running out of time, but I'm going to kind of go down this one pathway and kind of open it up to you. When you see product marketers in most organizations, what can they focus on today to do a better job when it comes to content and marketing, things of that nature? Just common pitfalls that you might say, hey, this is something you might want to focus on that can make your life a lot easier and you can do your job a little bit better.
Sure, there's a lot of different directions that I can go in, but the biggest one is you've got to use AI. You've got to use generative AI. You can write a piece a lot faster when you have your outline and your foundation, and then of course pairing it with research and ensuring that you're feeding AI good information, credible information, and you can increase your productivity like 400%. As an analyst, as someone who worked many years without Gen AI in typical roles, that there would have been tremendous need for it. Now I've literally increased my productivity in tremendous ways. I'm working hard, but I'm also working a lot smarter than I used to. So product marketer, your AI is your greatest asset. It can help you organize all the research that you're pulling together, come up with summaries, especially when you're dealing with features, and just essentially make you lethal if you know how to use it the proper way. That's my biggest piece of advice right now for 2025.
I love it. That's amazing. Well, Natalie, we have run out of time for today's episode, but if anyone would like to reach out and continue the conversation online, how and where can they find you?
Sure. So they can always go ahead and email me, natalie.schibell@ateon.com. Happy to answer any questions about Ateon, our products, and our great team of scientists and product specialists there. But that's where you can find me for now.
All right. And I can cut this out if you don't want me to promote this, but you were telling me about your cool nonprofit and everything
Sure.
you're doing on the side. Would love to have you share that with the audience as well.
Yeah. If they have any questions about what mission to commission is and how we're helping individuals joining the military and transitioning from the military, they can also reach out to me at natalie.schibell@missiontocommission.org.
I love it. Again, Natalie, thank you so much for the time and insights today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.